My wife of 5 years admitted to cheating and is placing the blame on me. We're both 35, and next week marks 5 years together. We've known each other since elementary school, and we're kind of childhood sweethearts. We've been engaged for 2 years, but COVID made a traditional wedding difficult, so we postponed. Until a week ago, we were trying to conceive our first child. 3 days ago, I assumed she had gone to bed while I was reading a book. Out of the blue, she appeared, tears flowing down her face, and confessed, "I'm so very sorry, I've cheated on you." I'm certain many of you can understand just how gut-wrenching that moment is. Never in my life had I been hit with such an overwhelming storm of emotions. Rage that burned white-hot, grief so deep it was suffocating, disbelief, hatred, even physical pain all crashing down at once. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I just started throwing my things together while she trailed behind me like a desperate lost puppy pleading with me to speak. The only thing I managed to say was right before I left the apartment. "Thank you for telling me." I never thought I could hit a woman, but God forgive me, if she had tried to touch me during that moment, I might have lost it. I'm so thankful she didn't. For the past 72 plus hours, I've barely slept. I'm devastated. I can hardly speak in full sentences. My mind is racing, my heart is constantly pounding, my mouth is dry, and yet I'm sweating. It hurts like nothing else. I have so much work to do with the end of the year approaching, a mother diagnosed with cancer to care for, and all I want to do is lie down and cry until I can't anymore. Why do people do this? If you want to have your fun, just leave me. It would still hurt, a lot, but at least you would be showing some respect for me, my dignity, and my feelings. I can't understand how someone can be with another person and then come home and kiss me. Just writing this makes me feel sick. It's disgusting. She called yesterday, and after I composed myself a bit, I returned the call. We had a long talk, mostly civil. She explained that for the past 7 months, she hadn't felt wanted or like a woman. This is somewhat true. I changed jobs and faced a steep learning curve, so I was swamped with work and often exhausted. The situation with my mom also took a toll, so I admit that our bedroom wasn't exactly filled with passion for a while, and that's on me. She gave me a few details. Her partner was another man with a wife and children, someone she met at work. It happened only once, they used protection, but it was planned, not some random drunken encounter at a bar. She knows that I'm not the kind of man who can forgive or forget infidelity. And she's right, it's a red line for me, and I've made that clear to her many times over the years. She said she couldn't bear to lie to me any longer. The affair happened about 3 months ago, even though she knew the consequences. She told me I was the love of her life, that she wanted to grow old together, and that she hates herself for what she did. She said she doesn't recognize the woman she became in that moment, but she completely understands if I never want anything to do with her again. Her only hope is that, if time heals and I somehow find forgiveness in the future, she'll have a clear conscience and won't be living a lie. I don't know what to think. I don't know what's true and what's not. I don't know if I'm seeking advice, a kind word, or just trying to get this off my chest. It's just so painful that I'm constantly screaming inside. Update. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you so much. The fact that you took the time to read through this despite hearing similar stories before and offered guidance, resources, or insight is overwhelming for me. That said, there are a few clarifications I'd like to add. We're not married, just engaged, so there's no legal bond. Thankfully, there won't be any divorce proceedings, lawyers, etc. When I said we were trying to conceive until a week ago, I meant we'd been trying for about 1.5 years. We both got checked out by doctors, and there didn't seem to be any issues that would prevent us from having a baby. But it just didn't happen, and I think this affected her more than she let on. She has a younger sister who recently got pregnant for the second time, and while she was happy for her, I could see that it hurt her as well, like she was asking herself, what's wrong with me/us? Was it stress? Fate? Not enough sex? Bad luck? I don't know. She did communicate the issue to me, and we talked about it at length on a few occasions. I'm not defending her, just stating the facts. We're very different people. She always said that sex was one of, if not the most important part of a relationship. For me, it's important, but not the top priority. I enjoy it, but I don't have a constant craving for it. So I can go a week or two without that kind of intimacy. But but she finds that difficult. Apparently, I also had trouble expressing my desire for her, and she communicated that to me before the affair. She always said that sex with me was great. She never turned me down and often initiated it. But she said that even if I wanted her, she hadn't felt it for quite a while, and in the end felt like she was always chasing me rather than the other way around. That hurt her ego and feminine side, I guess. I have to admit that her assessment is mostly accurate. And here's the kicker. I think what prompted her confession was the fact that I had taken steps to be more proactive in our relationship, especially in the past month. I approached her more often, and we were doing well in the bedroom. I don't know if that makes sense to you. During our long conversation, she also expressed a desire to personally explain the reason for our breakup to both her family and mine. She has already spoken to her family. Her father called me yesterday. It was brief, and he essentially said, "I'm very sorry for how things turned out. You know I respect you greatly as a man, and I hope you two can find a way forward if at all possible." She's already reached out to my brother, who knows we've separated but doesn't know why, and they're supposed to talk today or tomorrow. As for my mom, it's a messed up situation, and it will likely become clear around Christmas, but she asked if I wanted to handle it any differently. Regarding the other guy and his relationship, many of you suggested finding his wife and explaining the situation to her, but that's not something I can do. My fiance works at her father's family business, and this guy was some kind of contractor among many others they deal with. I really don't have the energy or mental capacity to hunt him down and unravel everything. That's not who I am, and I'm genuinely afraid of what it might do to my sanity if I go down that rabbit hole. I don't know who he is and don't care. I don't know the state of his relationship and don't care. And I don't know any details about whether she was told, by whom, etc. I completely understand where you all are coming from, but playing private investigator and then going scorched earth isn't in my nature. Also, it might sound selfish, and it probably is, but taking that action would likely uncover things that would bring me even more pain, and that's the last thing I need right now. Reading back over everything, it might come off as mild and apologetic, but believe me, it's not. This is just how things are from my perspective. Everything between us is over, and just the thought of any contact with her repulses me. However, I want to present the situation as it is, to the best of my knowledge, not paint myself as the ultimate victim or depict her as some kind of demon. Hopefully, someone can learn something from the implosion of my relationship. Once again, thank you all for every word of encouragement and every piece of advice. I'm deeply humbled. I'll try to update after a few weeks and share how I'm dealing with the aftermath. Update 2. It's been about a week since D-Day. She called almost every day to check up on me. For the first few days, I was too numb and just mumbled yeah on the phone. Eventually, I realized she was taking me on her guilt trip and asked why the hell she kept calling. I haven't seen her since D-Day. One thing led to another and the truth came out. Here's her final version of events. Why did she do it? She planned it as revenge against me, a pity revenge. She wanted to rub my nose in it for all the times I neglected her, for the times our bedroom was silent, for the times I looked right through her as if she didn't exist. Her words almost verbatim. She did it, and she did it more than once. Most of you were right. It wasn't a one-time thing, and she started to develop feelings for the other guy. Why did she tell me? She said she told me because she still loved me, that I was her great love and she couldn't bear to lie to me any longer. However, she made it clear that she still wants the emotional connection of the affair and intends to continue with it and with him, again, almost verbatim. But if that fizzles out, which she somehow expects it will, she hopes to come back to me with a clear conscience. Basically, she wants and needs the affair right now, but if somewhere down the line I could forgive her, at least there wouldn't be any secrets between us. Needless to say, I was stunned by this. The other guy's wife and kids? Against my better judgment and sounding like a complete idiot, I asked her about the status of his marriage. They were separated. Yes, I checked, and it's true. They don't live together. Not officially divorced, but separated. My mom? She took it like a champ. God, I don't know where she draws her strength from, but in a time when I should have been her rock, she once again became mine. Mom, you'll never read this, but you're the best parent anyone could ever wish for. What have I done? I decided to quit smoking completely, my biggest addiction, give up alcohol, more of a social drinker, but still, cut out energy drinks I'd been consuming a lot more in recent months, and restart my regular exercise routine. It's only been a week, but so far I've managed. How do I feel? I feel like crap. I barely eat, I barely sleep, it feels like I'm in hell. All the images and thoughts come unbidden, overwhelming me, and I struggle to function at all. I'm a simple man who lived by simple rules. Respect your woman, provide as best you can, be faithful. She bulldozed through my sense of self, annihilated my self-respect, my dignity, and my hope. My brother saw me the other day and literally begged me to get my act together, saying I looked like the ghost of a ghost. I've read many stories here since I posted mine, and honestly, you guys and gals have gone through far worse. I'm not married, I have no kids, I have a wonderful family and friends, and a decent job. Some of you have real horror stories, and I'm absolutely humbled that you kept going. Well, I just want to curl up in a ball and disappear. How the hell did it come to this? Update 3. It's been more than a month since D-Day, and honestly, there's not much to update. Some of you asked about her and her affair/relationship. I honestly don't know and don't care. I haven't seen or asked about her. In January, we had only one brief conversation on the 5th or 6th dot. She begged me to call to sort out some final technicalities, asking about towels and blankets and other nonsense. I said, "Are you really calling to arrange the handover of towels? Throw them away, burn them, keep them, I don't care." And that's when she, thankfully, destroyed any last remaining shred of respect I had for her. I called you because I felt weak, but don't take this as a sign of hope for us. That's when it fully hit me what a miserable liar and cheat I've been dealing with. Not only did she nearly destroy my life, not only did she manipulate me into thinking it was as much my fault as hers, but now she's dangling hope for us, like it's something she controls. The sheer audacity. Some of you called her exactly what she is, a parasite that took a good heart and turned it into a wasteland. Absolutely no contact after that. But I'll survive this, and I'll survive her. I'll get better. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not even in a year, but I will. As for her, at some point in life, we all get what we deserve. When that moment comes, whether it's a week from now or decades later, I won't be there. Let fate sort her out in its own time and way. Now on to the next story. My wife just admitted that she cheated on me with her ex-boyfriend a month after we became exclusive. We've been together for 13 years. My wife, 37F, and I, 35M, have been together for 13 years, married for 10. We've got 3 kids, 2, 5, and 7 years old. Over the weekend, everything came crashing down, and I've been a complete wreck. I honestly don't know how to handle any of this. We met when she was 24 and I was 22. She was in a relationship then, a 5-year-long one, with her boyfriend at the time. We became friends through school, working on assignments together, totally platonic. I remember asking about her boyfriend, and she confided in me that their relationship was falling apart. They weren't intimate anymore, and he was emotionally abusive, criticizing her outfits, calling her fat, which she absolutely wasn't, and openly comparing her to other women he found more attractive. He'd even cheated on her a few times and started seeing other women near the end of their relationship. One day, she called me, just as a friend, to vent about everything. She told me her boyfriend had said he wanted to explore other women and thought they should break up. She was devastated, so I took her out for lunch just to listen and be there for her. A week later, she called again to tell me he had officially dumped her and was moving out of the house they shared. Being a 22-year-old guy, I thought, perfect. Maybe I could be her rebound and get with her. I know it was crappy of me, but at that age, I wasn't thinking about the long-term consequences. We started going on regular dates, even though she was still living with her ex. Our conversations were often about her breakup and the mess it brought with it. I'd pick her up from their house and we'd hang out. This went on for a few weeks, and eventually we slept together when I brought her back to my place one night. After that, I realized I really liked her, so I asked her to be my girlfriend. She was still living with her ex, who hadn't moved out yet, so I found myself dating someone who was still sharing a house with her ex-boyfriend. But I trusted her when she said it was over between them. She seemed to genuinely dislike him. Just to clarify the timeline, they broke up, and about a month later, I asked her to be my girlfriend. We kept seeing each other, and I was there for her as she worked through getting him out of her life. He finally found his own place and moved out a few weeks later. Once he was out of the picture, our relationship started to feel more real, free of the drama that had been hanging over us. About a week after he moved out, roughly a month into our exclusive relationship, I planned a date night for us. We were supposed to meet at 7 p.m. at a restaurant. I texted her an hour before but got no response. I tried calling, but there was nothing. I ended up driving over to her place, but she wasn't home. I was worried but didn't know what to do. She called me at 11 p.m., apologizing like crazy. She said she'd been at a friend's place studying for finals and left her phone in the car, completely forgetting about our date. She felt awful. I told her it was okay and didn't think much of it. I trusted her and we moved on. A week later, her ex-boyfriend started harassing her with nonstop calls. She told him to leave her alone, that she didn't want him back, even though he was desperate to reconcile. It got so bad that he'd sit outside her house for hours. One day, I was there when he showed up, and she ended up calling the police. She eventually filed a restraining order against him, and we didn't hear from him again. About a year later, after a few drinks, she let something slip. She admitted that the night she was supposedly studying and left her phone, she was actually at her ex's house. She apologized, saying his mom was in town and she'd gone over to help him patch things up with her. She'd been close to his mom, so she agreed to have dinner with them and talk about their relationship. She said that after dinner, she went back to his new place with his mom, and the three of them kept talking. As the night wore on, it got late, and instead of driving home, she decided to stay over. I was obviously upset about the whole situation, but she assured me she had told him she didn't want to be in a relationship with him anymore and had moved on. She insisted nothing happened between them. Over the next several years, I kept pressing her about that night. It gnawed at me, making me feel insecure. Every time I asked if she had cheated on me, she swore she hadn't. She claimed she just went over there to talk, left her phone in the car, and fell asleep after I called her. She said she felt awful lying, but was dealing with so much after her breakup that she didn't know how to handle it. But she never wavered. She maintained she hadn't cheated on me, even though I couldn't shake the doubt. We ended up getting married and having 3 kids. But this past weekend, I couldn't let it go. I pressed her one last time about that evening. I told her something just didn't sit right with me, even after all these years. It randomly popped into my head and I asked her again, what really happened that night? I'm not sure I believe you or your story. It just doesn't make sense. She broke down crying, and in that moment, I knew. She confessed that she had never wanted to tell me the truth. She admitted she did go over to his house with his mom, but after his mom left, they talked about their relationship. One thing led to another, and they ended up having sex on the sofa. She said she was confused about her feelings, caught between being 2 months out of a 5-year relationship with him and dating me, when she hadn't processed the breakup and didn't know what she wanted, especially since he had dumped her but was now begging to get back together. She told me they had sex, and then she called me when I was frantically trying to reach her, worried sick. She ended up staying the night and went home the next morning. After that, she told him she didn't want to get back together and they needed to stay apart. I know it all stopped after that because she clearly avoided him and even got a restraining order against him in the following weeks. But now, I'm sitting here, feeling shattered. She confessed to lying to me for the past 13 years and had been gaslighting me the entire time. Every time I asked about that night, she denied anything inappropriate had happened, making me feel crazy and insecure. I had convinced myself I was just losing my mind, but now I know she did cheat on me that night. I keep telling myself that when we started dating, she had just been dumped by a guy she'd been with for 5 years and I was a rebound. She was even still living with him at the beginning. I believe her when she says she hasn't cheated any other time and that it was just an overlap between her relationship with him and me. But that doesn't erase the hurt. Knowing she lied to me all these years leaves me feeling confused and devastated. We've been together for 13 years, we have 3 kids, and we've had a great relationship otherwise. But this revelation is overwhelming. I'm even considering divorce. After 13 years, finding out that she cheated on me during our first month of being exclusive and then lied to me about it this whole time has left me a wreck. I know I need to process this before making any decisions, but I wanted to share this here to gain some perspective and clarity. She's been apologizing nonstop, reassuring me that she feels terrible and only lied because she knew it would never happen again. She realized after that night that she wanted to be done with him for good and was just confused at the time, transitioning from a long-term relationship with him to a new one with me. She understands why I'm devastated and keeps reminding me that she was young, hurt, confused, and didn't know what she wanted until after that night. I'm certain she hasn't stepped out on our relationship any other time. If there was ever a moment to question, it was that one night when she disappeared and I had no idea where she was. After that, I always knew where she was, who she was with, and I never had any reason to suspect anything was wrong. Do I need to take a step back and work on forgiving her, or is this a deal breaker? I love her with everything I have, and we've built a life and a family together, but this is the hardest thing I've ever had to face. Now on to the next story. My wife leaves her engagement ring at home so she can hook up at work, all while still wanting to stay with me. The holidays were pretty good, at least on my end. We kicked off 2024 on a positive note. I hung out with friends after a hockey tournament on the first weekend of January the 6th, while she went out with some colleagues who she's starting to see as friends. Last Friday, the 12th, she came home early Saturday morning, and we started what seemed like a good weekend with the kids, who are 2 and 5. I mainly work nights to make sure the little one is cared for and to take the older one to school. Once she's back from work, I head out for my shifts. I handle a lot around the house for her and the kids. I've been raising the older one since he was 17 months old. She has full custody of him, while the younger one is biologically mine. But Monday night, everything changed for the worse, or at least that's how it feels. Out of nowhere, she seemed to have some sort of snap and told me she wasn't happy anymore and needed time to figure herself out. She mentioned looking into therapy to sort out her thoughts. I was prepared to give her the time and space she needed. I even reached out to set up couples therapy since she brought it up during a calmer conversation that night. On Tuesday, she started taking new anxiety and depression medication. She said she'd been having anxiety attacks at work, mostly because she was thinking about our relationship and how she felt about it. This all came up after I asked why she had left her engagement ring at home, something she never used to do. That night, we tried to talk again about how she was feeling and what the next steps might be. At least I tried, but it was like talking to a brick wall. We weren't making any progress. We've had communication issues before, but nothing as bad as this. We've always managed to work through things and find our way back to each other. Wednesday rolls around and once again she leaves the ring at home. She said that wearing it just added pressure because she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. She said she didn't want to put it back on until she figured things out. We had another conversation that night, and while it seemed to go a little better, she still wasn't really engaged. These were the kinds of conversations she'd always wanted. Me opening up and sharing my feelings, yet it didn't seem like she was truly invested. By Thursday, the ring was still sitting at home, and we didn't talk much throughout the day. Even so, I was still hopeful we could get through this. I had already reached out to a couples therapist, looked into our benefits coverage, and was ready to take things seriously when she was. But that night, she didn't give me much. She went to bed early, right after the kids. Friday morning, I didn't hear from her again, and the ring was back in its original box. I didn't know what to think. I started my morning as usual, getting the kids ready and taking the older one to school. When I got home, I opened my computer and started searching the web, trying to make sense of whether what was happening was normal. Then, all of a sudden, her messages started popping up on my computer, one after another. It turns out she had been heavily sexting a coworker I'd questioned her about recently. I've been cheated on in the past, so trusting isn't easy for me, but I had trusted her until now. These texts were nothing like anything I'd ever seen before. I couldn't believe it was her sending those messages while I was at home with the kids, and she was supposedly finding herself. I kept reading every message, trying to understand. She said that nothing they were doing would affect her life more than it already had. Turns out, she'd been giving him oral during lunch breaks, going out to lunch together, and on Thursday they finally slept together. Now they're planning a night out next weekend while I'm home with the kids. My stomach was in knots. I didn't know what to think. He's younger than her and doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's ready to take care of her, let alone 2 kids under 6, both with different fathers. I'm not sure what led her to this. When I confronted her about it, she said he'd expressed his feelings for her during a lunch, and things just escalated from there. When I tried to talk about it more, she struggled to admit what she'd done and still hasn't apologized. She's saying that this isn't the real issue, that what we need to focus on now is figuring out the next steps for the kids while she deals with what she's going through. She's also saying we need to talk more about it, even though I've been trying my best these past few days. She claims she didn't really think this through and went to bed early while I was still at work, trying to process everything. I asked if she was ready to end things with the guy, but she hasn't answered that yet. She wants to keep living together and even share the same bedroom, but I'm not sure I can get over this. We had everything we wanted and we're set to get married in 8 months. Every part of me wants to try and make this work through counseling, but my closest friends and parents are telling me to leave, split the assets, and figure out custody. I can't imagine anything less than being with the kids full-time and raising them like I've been doing. Am I crazy to think I can somehow make this work while she's still working with the guy? Financially, I have a place to go. She doesn't. She said before I accused her of cheating that she didn't see anything serious with this guy and he's not ready to handle kids. She says, "We'll talk about it today when I get home. I'm torn about what's best for me and the kids. I can't imagine being away from them." Has anyone else dealt with a similar situation? Am I crazy to stay for the kids and try to make her desire me again when she's already said she doesn't feel that passion for me anymore, but clearly does for this guy? How could I trust her to go out again when I'm not there, or go to work in the same building as this guy? Does this type of situation ever work out? She always told me she would leave before she cheated. I was crazy to think she wouldn't, but it happened. She's the love of my life. I'm so torn and heartbroken. She's trying to spin it on me, saying I pushed her to feel this way. I never thought she would actually cheat on me. My girlfriend talked me out of accepting a promotion, only to cheat on me with the guy who ended up getting it. This is a throwaway account since my main one has too many personal details. I just need to get this off my chest because I'm feeling beyond embarrassed, ashamed, and angry at myself for ending up in this situation. For context, everyone in this story is around 30 years old. I work as a facility operator, which most people would call a custodian, but I have some other duties as well. The guy my girlfriend cheated on me with, let's call him Ken, also works as a facility operator. Well, now he's a superintendent. I don't want to make this about race, but I can't help but think it played a role. For the record, I'm Indian and my girlfriend Jen and Ken are both white, Italian-Canadian. Jen has been my first real long-term relationship. We've been together for 4 years. Her parents have never been overly warm towards me. They'll engage in small talk for a few minutes and that's about it. She's told me that they believe she'd be happier with someone more like her, and that if you were going to date outside your race, you could have at least chosen an Indian with money. I wasn't Jen's first serious boyfriend. She had 2 before me, both of whom were tall white guys. So I was different from them. I make decent money, but living in Toronto is insanely expensive. My base salary is around $55K, and with overtime, I can push it up to about $80K, though that requires working at least 2 or 3 extra shifts a week. A superintendent position opened up at work, which would involve managing the facility side of things for a cluster of buildings. The salary for this job was $75K. Technically less than what I could make, but it would mean working fewer hours. I mentioned it to Jen and she convinced me to stick with my current position since I could make more money that way. Foolishly, I agreed. I turned down the promotion and continued in my role, even adding another shift to my schedule. Jen used to drop by my work from time to time, so she knew the guys I worked with, including Ken. After I turned down the promotion, Ken was offered it and he accepted. Then, Jen suggested that I take on even more shifts so I could earn more than the superintendent, which I stupidly agreed to. I was working my regular Tuesday to Saturday 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., plus an extra shift from 2 or 3 p.m. until 10 or 11 p.m. 3 times a week. It was exhausting, but I did it to save up for a condo in Toronto and to impress her family. We were renting a place together and had just signed a lease until February of next year. Jen was thrilled that I was working so much overtime, even though we weren't seeing each other as much. I thought it was strange, but I figured she was just happy we'd be able to stop renting when our lease ended next year. She even encouraged me to take on more overtime, 4 or even 5 extra shifts a week. And like an idiot, I did it. Was completely exhausting myself, working 16-hour days, 5 days a week. But the more I pushed myself, the happier Jen appeared, so I kept going for as long as I could. Then one day, I fell ill and left my shift early, probably around 3 or 4 p.m. When I got home, Jen was in the shower having just returned from work. I figured I'd surprise her when she finished up. After about 10 minutes, she was done with her shower but hadn't come out of the bathroom yet. Just then, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there stood Ken. He looked shocked to see me, and I was just as shocked to see him. He tried to play it off, saying he thought he was going to someone else's place and must have gotten the wrong door, but I knew that was bullshit. Jen must have heard something because she came running out. She pretended she didn't know him, but the looks on their faces gave it away. After seeing that I wasn't buying it, she tried to blame me, saying I was working too much and never had time for her. We ended up having a huge shouting match. I had given up the promotion only for her to sleep with the guy who got it. Ken offered a half-hearted apology, but it was clear he didn't mean it, considering he'd been seeing her for a while. I'll admit, I didn't have much energy for intimacy, working as much as I was. And it should have been a red flag that she wasn't interested in sex lately. They admitted the affair had been going on for about 3 months, right after Ken accepted the promotion and just before we renewed our lease. Jen even admitted that Ken was exactly her type and that her parents would love a guy with the title of superintendent. Now I'm stuck renting this place with Jen for the next 10 months. We've obviously broken up, but neither of us wants to leave because we don't want to pay the rent alone. I don't even know how to end this post. It's just so messed up all around. There was no good reason not to take that promotion. I only didn't because she talked me out of it. That's 100% on my dumb ass. I spoke to the landlord on Thursday, and he had a separate conversation with Jen. I'm paying for May, and after that, I'm officially off the lease. I've secured a storage unit and will be packing up my things. Most of the furniture was bought by her parents, so I won't take any of it. It'll just be my clothes, personal items, and my computer/work desk. Apparently, Ken is moving in at some point, so the landlord will still have 2 tenants paying the same rent. My brother and his wife have generously offered to let me stay at their place. They're not charging me rent, but I'll have to help out with the yard work, mowing the lawn and weeding in the summer, shoveling snow in the winter, that sort of thing. So the good news is, I'm out of the lease without much penalty at all. A lot of people suggested I contact HR about this, so I did. There were a few misconceptions I want to clear up. All the times Ken turned down overtime shifts and I picked them up, we were both facility operators. He wasn't a superintendent yet. Since he became superintendent, he's working on a completely different cluster of buildings, so he doesn't oversee anything I do and doesn't assign my overtime. When I told HR what happened between him and my ex, they basically said they were sorry about the situation, but there wasn't much they could do. I'm still next in line for any superintendent positions that come up, but it might be a while before another opportunity arises. They did say they could add a note to both of our work profiles, making sure we can't work together and that he won't oversee me. This was pretty much what I expected from HR. I think screwing another guy's girlfriend is frowned upon, but it's not against company policy, especially since it didn't happen at work. Lastly, Jen called me last night saying she missed her period. It's 2 weeks late. She hasn't taken a pregnancy test yet, and it's probably too early to know for sure anyway. I told her we haven't done anything in months, so if she really is pregnant, it's a good thing Ken's making superintendent money now to support his kid. Then I blocked her number. The apartment is still half mine until June 1st, so I don't need to let her know when I'm entering my legal space. Now on to the next story. Heartbreak and reflection, uncovering betrayal on our 10th wedding anniversary. Yesterday marked our 10-year wedding anniversary. Megan and I, both 35, have been married for a decade. Over the past few months, she's been deep in a significant work project. The past 4 weeks in particular have been intense, with her putting in extra hours, arriving early, and staying late to meet her deadline. This project could make or break her career. I work in construction, where our schedule is heavily influenced by the weather. When it rains, we miss time, so on clear days, we push hard 12-hour days, sometimes longer. If it's raining when I wake up, I don't go in, and some days we're sent home if the weather turns, as it's too risky to continue. I usually hit the gym for an hour or 2 on those days. This past Thursday, we started work at 6 a.m., but mid-morning the rain came down hard, and we got sent home. As usual, I headed to the gym, but cut my workout short, deciding to surprise Megan downtown with some flowers and hopefully make dinner plans. We hadn't seen much of each other that week, with me going to bed around 9 p.m. while she was still at work, having called earlier to say she'd be late again. It wasn't unusual for this past month. I grabbed some flowers and arrived at her building around 12:30. Nickel, the receptionist, was at her desk. I mentioned I'd gotten there later than planned and asked if she could place the flowers on Megan's desk. Nickel suggested I drop them off myself, saying, "I don't think they've gone to lunch yet." She buzzed me through to the offices, which were deserted. I made my way to Megan's office. The door closed. Normally, I'd just walk in unless Nickel mentioned she was in a meeting. I opened the door, and there he was, some guy standing behind her, nuzzling her neck while she reached back, her hand over his head. She was giggling in that way only she can, saying, "We've got to get this done." The sight knocked the wind out of me. I slammed the flowers on her desk, muttered, "Happy anniversary," and walked out. I didn't hear her response, just walked past Nickel, said goodbye, and left. I made it to the elevators, then out of the building before my phone started ringing. I cried all the way home, pulled into the garage, grabbed my camping gear from the rafters and took off. I drove for about 2 hours to a state park. I had no idea what I was doing. I just needed to escape. I hiked a trail we'd walked before, a 3-hour hike, trying to clear my head. I don't drink much, so I had no alcohol with me. I just sat there, Looking back, I'm grateful I was in such a rush that I didn't bring my .45 caliber handgun, which I normally take camping. We have black bears in the area. They usually scare off but can get aggressive if they're hungry or have cubs. Given how I was feeling, I might have done something reckless. My phone was blowing up with calls from Megan, so I turned it off. I eventually left the park to get reception and turned my phone back on, seeing that my good friend had called. I returned his call, and he said Megan had reached out to him, worried I might do something stupid. We talked for a bit, and I told him I needed to sort through this on my own and would catch up with him on Friday. As I tried to process everything, I reflected on our marriage from the beginning, wondering what I'd missed. We came from completely different backgrounds. My grandfather and mom raised me, teaching me about life. My grandpa had a saying for everything, and he used to tell me that marriage would be the hardest job I'd ever have, something that needed daily effort. God, I miss him. We didn't have much, and I often overheard Mom and Grandpa discussing bills, but they worked hard, and my brother and I never felt we were missing out on anything. Megan, on the other hand, was born into comfort. Not overly rich, but definitely well off. She attended a great college, always had the latest fashion, and drove a new car. And she's stunning, an 11 out of 10. I used to joke with her about the silver spoon getting stuck in her throat when she'd cough. When we met, we clicked immediately and started dating. I couldn't believe someone like her would be with me. We dated for a while before she told me about her parents and their lifestyle. Our friends called us the model couple, thinking we were too good-looking not to be models. Our families, however, were more skeptical, worried that the economic differences between us would cause problems. Her dad and I eventually got along, but it took some time for my mom to warm up. She graduated, got her first job, and we started planning our wedding. We made a pact to immerse ourselves in each other's worlds. She joined me for whitewater rafting while I went to the symphony with her. We tried ziplining, attended art openings, you name it, we did it. We agreed that we needed to embrace each other's interests. She genuinely enjoyed the physical activities, and I found myself liking the symphony and such. I even own 2 tuxes now. Looking back, I can't see any red flags. She left her first 2 jobs because men tried to get in her pants. They'd parade her in front of cameras for photo ops, invite her to conferences where other newbies weren't invited. At one conference dinner, a partner tried to get her drunk and then forced himself into her room that night. She quit. The same thing happened at her next job, so she left again. This third job, where some of the partners are women, doesn't have any of that nonsense, and she seemed really happy there. We seemed really happy. Now it's Friday, and I'm back home. I called her and asked where she was. Still at work. In a smart-ass mood, I commented that our marriage seemed to be taking a backseat to her job. She replied that since I wouldn't talk to her, what else was she supposed to do? Fair enough. She said she'd be home in an hour, so I waited. I want to save our marriage. If I've fallen short somehow, I want to fix it. Of course, I want to ask why she did it, but I can't accept an "I don't know" as an answer. Now on to the next story. My wife was with 32 different men before we got married. Now she has to agree to let me sleep with other women or we're getting a divorce. My wife and I started dating back in high school, and even then we were already dreaming about married life, talking about what we'd name our kids, where we'd live, all that stuff. We were even each other's firsts. When it was time to choose universities, I got accepted into the same one she had picked. But I also got offered a spot at one of the top universities in the world. Since we'd always planned for her to be a stay-at-home mom, we decided I should go to the better university to boost my future earning potential, even though it meant we'd be in a long-distance relationship. During my time at university, I did my best to visit her almost every weekend, and I honestly thought things between us were going great. Just last week, we were at a party with some mutual friends, reminiscing about the old days, when one of her friends casually mentioned how wild she was during university. At first, I almost didn't catch it, but when I looked over at my wife, her face had gone pale, and she was giving her friend a look that could kill. I decided not to confront her right then and there, or even on the drive home, but she could tell something was off by how I suddenly went quiet. Once we were home, I made sure our boys, who are 13 and 16, were asleep before I confronted her about what her friend had said. I told her that if I felt she was lying, I'd make her call that friend right then and there to talk about her university days while I listened. She hesitated a bit, but eventually she admitted that she was really into clubbing during university and that it led to several hookups and even a few ongoing friends with benefits situations. She kept saying that she was just an immature kid back then and that I shouldn't hold it against her. At that point, I was afraid I'd lose my temper, so I left the house and spent the night at a hotel. The whole night, she kept texting and calling, alternating between telling me she loves me and giving me every excuse under the sun. She kept insisting that it was no big deal and that things are different now because we're married. But for me, nothing has changed. The fact that we've been married for 18 years doesn't change the reality that she cheated. This whole time, I believed we shared something special, that we were each other's first and only, but now I see that it was all just a lie. I spent a few days really thinking it over, even went so far as to meet with one of my friends who happens to be a divorce lawyer. Despite everything, I still love her and want to work things out, but I can't and won't stay in a marriage where I feel this way. Every time I look at her, I feel a wave of disgust. I feel like I waited for her, even though I had other options, while she made me the butt of a joke. So, 2 days ago, I sat down with her at the table, pen and paper in hand, while our sons were with her parents. I told her to write down the names of the men she'd slept with and give me an estimate of how many times it happened. If she couldn't remember their names, I told her to just make some up. I warned her that if I ever found out she lied about the numbers, I would divorce her immediately, so she needed to be as accurate as possible. In the end, the total came out to about 27 men, with the number of encounters ranging from 1 to 32. Then I told her that I do want to reconcile, but I have conditions. Since she seems to think that sleeping with others while in a committed relationship is perfectly fine, I told her I would be sleeping with 27 women, the same number of times she just admitted to at times of my choosing without giving her a heads up. I made it clear this was non-negotiable for our reconciliation, and if she disagreed, she needed to tell me right then and there, or I would have my lawyer start drafting the divorce papers. At first, she just looked at me, bewildered, before she started shouting and crying, saying it's different now that we're married and that I would be cheating. I explained that since I was telling her in advance, it wasn't cheating, and if she agreed to this to save our marriage, I would take it as her consent. Since then, she's been trying everything to change my mind, crying day and night, having angry outbursts, offering me anything I want except for that. But nothing's going to make me budge. She either accepts it or we go through with the divorce. I've given her until the end of this week, Friday, to make her decision. I know some people might think I'm overreacting, so let me address that right now. I'm not afraid of getting a divorce. I'm still young enough to meet someone new. Plus, I own a few businesses that put me in contact with some very savvy lawyers who help minimize my taxable income and make smart business decisions that, as a bonus, also protect most of my assets in a divorce. I'll pay more than what's necessary in child support to make sure my kids are well taken care of, but she'll be getting the bare minimum in alimony. In my view, I wouldn't have married her if I'd known she had cheated, so she shouldn't benefit from our marriage. Am I wrong for potentially throwing away an 18-year marriage over infidelity that happened before we tied the knot? Now on to the next story. My wife and I decided to give each other hall passes for our 10th anniversary, and let's just say it didn't end well. I'm Alex, 35, and I've been married to my wife Emily, also 35, for the last 11 years. We met during our last year of college, hit it off instantly, and never looked back. After dating for just a year, we got engaged and tied the knot 4 weeks later. Our marriage has been pretty great overall. Sure, it's not perfect, we've had our share of arguments and heated moments, but after 12 years together, we've definitely gotten better at navigating the ups and downs of married life. Over the years, we've gone on lots of adventures and saved up a good amount of money. Just before our 10th anniversary, we had the big conversation about starting a family. We both agreed that we wanted just one kid, and we talked about the timing. We decided on 1 more year without kids so we could check off a few bucket list items. That year, we went skydiving, finally took our dream trip to Italy, hit the beach, and visited some amusement parks. We didn't just focus on each other. We also spent time reconnecting with old friends. Since we'd never had bachelor or bachelorette parties, we jokingly called this our last year of freedom before becoming parents. But it was on our 10th anniversary, right before this so-called freedom year, that we made a choice that's causing us all the drama we're dealing with now. For context, Emily and I have always had a really good sex life. We're both pretty high libido, and we share a lot of the same interests. We also both knew we'd been quite active before meeting each other. Nothing too wild, just about a dozen partners each and a few special experiences back in college. Since getting together though, it's always been just us. We planned a big day of fun for our 10th anniversary, ending with a fancy dinner and a night in a suite at a swanky hotel. During dinner, Emily started asking me questions, wanting to look back on our years together. It was great, and we spent a long time talking about our favorite memories. Then she asked, "What's something you miss about being single?" I answered honestly, "Don't get mad, but I kind of miss one-night stands." She laughed, which put me at ease, and admitted, "Yeah, I kind of do too." That kicked off a conversation about what we liked about one-night stands and reminiscing about our first night together, which had started as a casual hookup after a party. That's when I threw out, "We've got all these plans for the year ahead. What if we added a one-night hall pass to the list?" Emily seemed intrigued but cautious. "Maybe," she said. "You don't think that's too much? We've never done anything like that." I pressed on, "I don't think so. Let's talk about it this week and see how we feel." She agreed, and we enjoyed the rest of our night. Later that week, we revisited the hall pass idea. After some back and forth, we decided to go for it. We'd each have 1 year to use the pass, with the agreement that Emily would go off birth control on our 11th anniversary. We set some ground rules. It was a one-night end deal with someone outside our circle. We had to be safe and smart about it, and we had to let each other know when we were using the pass, at least a quick text if it was happening spontaneously. That year, we did everything we'd planned. I got on the dating apps and eventually found someone, a 30-year-old woman whose husband had just opened their marriage. She wasn't sure what she wanted from the arrangement and thought a one-night stand would be a good way to test the waters. I was the perfect fit, since that was all I was looking for too. We met, had a fun night, and I let Emily know beforehand. She was happy for me, and when I got home the next day, she reclaimed me. I figured Emily would use her pass soon after, but I was wrong. Throughout the year, I kept asking if she'd found anyone. She always said no, mentioning that none of the profiles stood out and maybe it was her. She told me she was interested in a younger guy, maybe around 25, but the ones she found seemed arrogant or immature. Almost 11 months in, Emily finally told me she was ready to use her hall pass. By then, I'd started feeling guilty, thinking she wasn't going to use hers. She explained that her situation was a bit unique and wanted to confirm if it still fit our rules because she didn't want to cross any lines. Emily told me that for the last 3 months, there had been a 23-year-old intern, Chris, working in another department at her company. They'd interacted here and there, mostly about work, since their departments often had to collaborate. She admitted she found him attractive, especially after realizing he wasn't just some clueless kid. But she also knew that hooking up with a coworker was a bad idea. Plus, there was a chance he might get hired full-time, and that would make things complicated with HR. But just a few days ago, Chris announced he'd be leaving the internship because he got a job in the same field with another company on the other side of the city. It seemed unlikely their paths would cross again, so Emily asked me if this was out of our lives enough to fit within our rules. I told her it sounded fine. just to be careful and smart. She assured me she would be, and she wouldn't make a move until after his last day. Fast forward a week and the day arrived. As Chris was saying his goodbyes at the end of his last shift, Emily offered to walk him out, which he found a bit odd. When they reached his car, she made her move, asking if he'd be interested in having a fun night together. She explained that she had one hall pass, good for one night, and that she'd get a hotel room if he was up for it. Chris was interested but hesitant. He wasn't sure if it was really okay and didn't want to mess around with someone's marriage. So Emily put me on FaceTime and Chris straight up asked if it was legit. I told him, "Yeah, man, I already used mine. You're her choice, so it's your call." According to Emily, that cleared up any doubts and he was all in. He followed her to a hotel and she came home the next morning. I reclaimed her and life moved on. A couple of weeks went by and our 11th anniversary rolled around. That same day, she stopped taking her birth control. 2 weeks later, Emily found out she was pregnant, which felt surprisingly fast. We booked an appointment, and today we learned she's actually around 7 weeks along. This lines up right with the timing of her hall pass night. But we'd also been having plenty of sex during that period, including the day after. Now I'm stuck in a whirlwind of uncertainty. She's pregnant, and there's a possibility the baby isn't mine. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. Emily needed some air, so she went for a walk to clear her head. I'm just here stewing, trying to figure out my next move while waiting for her to come back. This whole situation is a mess. The baby is here now, so let me catch you up on what's happened since that blow up with Emily. After my last post, I was sitting at home waiting for Emily to get back from her walk. When she did, we had a long conversation. I asked her if she'd used a condom with Chris, and she replied, "No, it didn't even cross my mind." I was floored and blurted out, "What happened to safe and smart?" Emily looked at me and said, "Is that what you meant? I thought you meant making sure they're not some psycho. I was on the pill. I don't know why you're freaking out. I've never made anyone use a condom before, so why would I think to start now?" I shot back, "Really, Emily? I don't know, maybe because you're not 21 anymore and you'd want to avoid catching something." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "I didn't want this to happen. I'm sorry, I just didn't think about it." "Did you use condoms when you used your pass?" "Yes," I said. "Every single time, better safe than sorry." I paused, then asked, "How many times did you two, She tilted her head, thinking for a moment. "5, she finally said. "Jesus." I followed up, "So he finished inside you 5 times? She shook her head. "No, just twice." I gave her a blank stare, and she explained, "I told him the same thing I always tell you and everyone before you." I replied flatly, "You can finish wherever you want?" "Of course you did." At that point, she broke down crying. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I answered, "I don't want to do anything right now. We should look into paternity tests, just so we know." A couple of weeks later, we had a follow-up with her doctor. Emily asked about her birth control failing, and the doctor went through a list of questions. We figured out that an athlete's foot medication she'd been taking could reduce the effectiveness of her birth control, even though that's rare. Not rare enough, I guess. Later, I asked if the pharmacist had mentioned anything when she picked up the prescription. Emily shrugged. "I don't know, I wasn't really listening. I checked the bottle later and, yep, there was a warning about birth control right on it." I was about to ask about getting a paternity test, but Emily gave me a look that told me not to. Once we were outside, I asked her why, and she said, "I don't want to ruin my pregnancy. It's probably yours." We had sex twice as many times around that period, but if we take the test and it's not yours, she started tearing up. "This is the only time I'm going to be pregnant. I'd rather believe I'm carrying your child than someone else's. I don't want to lose that. We've agreed we're keeping this baby, and you've told me you don't want us to separate, so can we just wait and do the test when the baby's here?" I agreed. I wanted her to enjoy her only pregnancy. We did all the usual things during the rest of the pregnancy. Set up the nursery, got the car seat and baby supplies, and stocked up on diapers. We made plans, packed a go bag, and I baby-roofed the house as best I could. Our parents were thrilled and threw us a baby shower. The pregnancy was smooth overall, and after 39 weeks, our beautiful baby girl, Willow, was born. While we were still in the hospital, Emily asked if I wanted to get the paternity test done now that our daughter was here. I told her, no, I don't care anymore. This perfect little girl is mine, and I don't need a test to confirm that. I'm her dad, and she's my girl. Emily was overjoyed. I think it was exactly what she needed to hear. We were about to take our daughter home and enjoy every moment ahead of us. The chances of this ever becoming an issue again seemed slim. Fast forward 22 years. I made some posts back then detailing the situation with my wife Emily's pregnancy. To recap, we gave each other hall passes, Emily used hers, and her birth control failed, leaving us uncertain about the paternity of our baby. We decided to keep the baby no matter what and chose not to get a paternity test, raising our daughter Willow together. Willow is now 22, a senior in college, and she always comes home for extended breaks and summers. Her university is only about an hour away, the same one Emily and I graduated from. She's an amazing young woman with a bright future ahead. This year, Willow asked if she could bring her boyfriend Carter home for the holidays. They've been together for about 9 months, and we agreed. The night they arrived, we had a big dinner planned. It was going great, and we were getting to know Carter. He seemed like a nice kid. He's from Oregon, but his grandparents live near the university, and that's why he chose to go to school here. Plus, it's where his dad went. Carter was curious about us too, and everything was fine until he asked Emily about her job. When she explained what she did, Carter said, "Oh, that's what my dad does." He went on to share that his dad interned at Emily's company before moving to a rival firm and eventually relocating to Oregon for a promotion. I saw Emily's face change, and I felt my stomach drop. I barely held it together. Emily, trying to stay calm, asked, "Carter, is that a nickname or were you named after the actor?" He laughed. "Sort of. It's actually my last name, Woodson. My first name is Josh, but everyone's called me Woody since middle school. You know, because it was funny when we were 12 and I just rolled with it." Emily was visibly shaken. "And what's your dad's name? I might remember him." Carter responded, "Wesley Woodson, but most people call him Wes." I felt like I was going to faint. Emily and I played it cool, but Willow noticed and asked if something was wrong. We quickly changed the subject and ended up playing Mario Party 30 with them, trying to distract ourselves. Afterward, they went off to Willow's room and we rushed into ours. "What the hell?" I blurted out. Emily was just as freaked out. "I know, right? What are the odds? Out of all the people in the world, she ends up with him. Oh my God, she might be sleeping with her own brother." I was in denial. "Are you sure? Maybe they're not even doing that." Emily shot me a look. "Seriously? She tells me everything. Normally, I don't share these details with you because you can't handle it, but we've got to face this. She's just like we were in college. They've been sleeping together since their first date. And he's not her first either. You need to deal with this reality." I tried to ignore everything she said, wanting to bury my head in the sand again. We realized we couldn't just demand that Willow break up with Carter without raising suspicions. She'd ask questions and we'd have no good answers. Plus, she's clearly into him, maybe even in love. With graduation coming up and life decisions on the horizon, we can't just sit back and hope this blows over. Now we're at a point where we have to make some tough decisions. We realize that getting a paternity test is necessary, but this is bound to raise questions. So we need to talk to Willow and be upfront with her because she's strong-willed and won't just accept anything without knowing the full story. We convinced her to send Josh back to his grandparents' place a half day early, giving us a little time to sort things out. It was an awkward day and a half, but we tried our best to keep everything normal so they wouldn't catch on. Then, we sat her down and explained the whole situation as delicately as possible, about the hall passes, about Wes, and our decision not to get a paternity test back then. Willow looked like she was going to be sick. She was furious and disgusted, and I can't blame her. In a single moment, she found out she might not know who her biological father is, and that she could be in a sexual relationship with her half-brother. We got the paternity test done, and now we're stuck in this 5-day waiting period for the results. Willow's pretending to be sick to avoid seeing Josh and to keep him from coming back here. They're still talking, but she's sad, and her downcast tone is helping sell the whole sick act. She's just hoping the test results show that I'm her dad. I'll update once we know more and this is all settled. It's been a month now, and I think we're finally starting to see the dust settle. Let's get right to the million-dollar question. Willow is not my biological daughter. She took it really hard. It wasn't just the news that I wasn't her father. She also realized she'd been in a relationship with her half-brother. It was devastating. We invited Josh back over, and he looked scared when he saw Willow crying. That's when we told him the truth about Emily and Wes, and how we never got a paternity test, figuring the odds of Willow and Josh finding each other were 1 in a billion. Josh was furious, storming out in shock. He came back later with his dad Wes on the phone. We explained that Willow was biologically his daughter. Wes remembered his night with Emily and was stunned. He said he'd get on the first flight here. Meanwhile, Willow wasn't willing to accept things as they were. She said, "This test only says you're not my father, not that his dad is mine. How do you know Mom didn't cheat?" Desperate for answers, she pushed for a DNA test between her and Josh. I knew what it would reveal, but I agreed if it gave her a little hope. Josh also agreed, and we sent the test off that day. Wes and his wife arrived the next day, and we showed them the paternity test results proving Willow wasn't mine. We also mentioned that we had tested Josh and Willow to confirm if they were siblings. Wes's wife was upset that we had tested Josh without their permission, feeling we were overstepping and disrupting their family's peace. "You've already dropped a bomb that my husband has a secret child, and now you're doing whatever you want with our son," she said, clearly distraught. Wes and Willow took another paternity test that day, and we mailed it off. The Woodsons went to stay with their family while we stayed home, trying to process everything together. We scheduled individual counseling for Willow and a family therapy session for all of us. Those days felt impossibly hard. When the results came back, we called the Woodsons, who were planning to come over to open them with us. They arrived, and I opened the DNA test results first. Willow and Josh were not siblings. Relief washed over the room. I glanced at Emily. She looked utterly confused, which made me hesitate before letting my anger rise. What happened next, I never saw coming. Wes opened his paternity test, and it confirmed that he was indeed Willow's biological father. He looked confused. "This doesn't make sense. How can I be her father, but they're not siblings?" I understood immediately. I watched as the realization hit him, pain clearly visible in his eyes. He turned to his wife, who immediately went on the defensive, angrily claiming the tests must be wrong and accusing us of trying to scam them. Her erratic response confirmed everything. In the week since, Willow and Josh have broken up but are still staying friends. They've been through so much in such a short time, and they're leaning on each other for support. Willow told me that Wes has been digging into his life and has uncovered awful truths. He learned that his wife had been cheating on him for years, even before they got married. Woody's younger brother, who is 14, also turned out to be a product of her infidelity, with a different father than Josh. To top it off, Wes found her very active account on a cheating forum where she boasted about her affairs, describing herself as living life to the fullest. Wes has already started the divorce process, and the prenup his parents insisted on will be a blessing. Wes called me today to ask about forming a relationship with Willow. He has a lot of mixed feelings, especially after being in the dark for over 20 years, but he wants to be involved now. I told him it's up to Willow to decide. We're still in family therapy trying to help Willow navigate this mess. She's holding up pretty well considering everything. I'm not sure what the future holds for all of us, but we're taking it one day at a time. Now on to the next story. Discovered that my wife was hooking up with her male best friend the entire time we were dating because it helped her figure me out. I'm Eli, 38, and right now I'm on a camping and hiking trip with my wife Liv, who's 36, and 3 other married couples: Dom and Kate, Sean and Sarah, Bill and Miranda. We also have Liv's longtime friend Ian, who's also 38, and his boyfriend Odie, whose real name is Orlando. And no, he wasn't named after the dog from Garfield. We're all in our mid-30s to early 40s, and we've been friends for a long time. We're all big fans of the outdoors and have been planning this hiking trip for a while. The plan was to hike during the day and camp at night. Everything was going smoothly until the evening of our 3rd day. We set up camp, and Liv and I decided to explore a bit around our campsite. We found this small waterfall, maybe 5 feet high, trickling into a rocky stream that we'd been following along our trail. It was secluded, quiet, and honestly, pretty picturesque. Liv said she wanted to rinse off in the stream and under the waterfall, but didn't want to get her clothes soaked. I told her to go for it. We weren't too far from the others, but the spot was hidden enough for a quick dip. She slipped out of her clothes, stepped under the water, and after a moment started drying off with the small hand towel we had. As she was finishing up and slipping her shorts and underwear back on in one move, Ian walked up from around the trees. Liv was still completely topless. What struck me was that neither of them reacted at all. She just casually kept getting dressed, and Ian strolled over like he'd seen her like this a million times before. He started talking to us, telling us something that Dom wanted us to know, but honestly, I was so thrown off, I don't even remember what it was. They chatted a bit, just idle small talk, and then we all made our way back to camp together like nothing had happened. The next morning, we went back and forth a couple times, started to get at the same thing. Now it's day 5, and the trail has led us into a small town where we've planned to stay the night at a little inn that caters to hikers. We figured a night of comfort would be good for everyone. Rest, restock supplies, and just recharge. But for the last 2 days, I haven't been able to get the waterfall scene out of my head. I've tried to play it cool, but my wife picked up on my mood and asked me why I was so quiet yesterday. I just told her I was tired, but the truth is, I can't stop thinking about how natural it all seemed between her and Ian. I wouldn't be this suspicious if I didn't already know Ian was bi, not strictly gay. I've known Ian for about 8 years, and over time, we've become friends too, but the truth is, all us husbands, and even Odie, are sort of the outsiders here. The 4 wives and Ian go way back to college. I've asked Liv before if she ever dated Ian, and she's always said no. I've also asked if any of the other women in the group had been involved with him, and she'd always denied that too. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but the way they interacted when she was still topless felt too familiar. Liv is usually pretty modest about her body, so for her not to react at all when Ian showed up felt off. I have no concrete reason to believe something's happening now, but I can't help but wonder if their past is more than just friends. Am I just being paranoid? Is this a red flag, or am I reading too much into it? I'm really trying not to jump to conclusions, but I can't shake the feeling. It's early on the morning of day 6, and I decided to talk to Liv about what happened by the waterfall. I wanted to get it out while we still had some privacy before hitting the trail again, and I'm glad I did. I tried to approach it calmly, just saying that it felt strange how unbothered she was when Ian walked up while she was topless. I wasn't expecting anything major, but her reaction was immediate and defensive. She shot back, "Is that why you've been moody? It's not a big deal. Everyone's seen boobs before, even Ian. You need to grow up." That response set off all sorts of alarms for me, because Liv usually only gets defensive when she's feeling guilty. I pushed a bit more, asking her to just be honest, but she kept deflecting, getting more defensive with every question I asked. There was a bit of gaslighting thrown in too, making it seem like I was the one overreacting. I finally reached my limit and told her, "Either tell me what's going on or I'll confront Ian, and you know he won't lie." That's when Liv finally confessed that she and Ian had been involved in a sexual relationship in the past. Lawyer, I was stunned and asked why she'd lied when I'd asked her before. She tried to justify it, saying, "I didn't lie, we never dated. It was just a friends with benefits thing right before you and I got serious." I couldn't believe it. "So you were sleeping with him when we first started dating?" I snapped. She snapped right back, "You don't have to be so vulgar. I don't want to talk about this right now. Can't we deal with this after the trip?" But I wasn't having it. "Absolutely not. You either come clean now or I start asking your friends." I think she saw that I wasn't bluffing, and all of a sudden the truth just started pouring out. Some of it I already knew. Liv's had a history of bad relationships, jumping into bed too quickly without really getting to know the person first. When we started dating, she asked if we could take things slow, and I was all for it. I was looking for someone special too, and Liv seemed like she could be that person. She even told me early on that I was free to see other people until we were official, but I said no. I'm not the type to date around, and I wanted to focus on one relationship at a time. She seemed genuinely happy when I told her that. But what she revealed next completely blindsided me. Liv told me about something that could shake our entire friend group if it ever got out. Apparently, Liv, Kate, Miranda, and Sarah had all had friends with benefits arrangements with Ian while they were dating their now husbands. Shortly after college, Kate, who's now married to Dom, was fed up with dating the wrong guys. During that time, she and Ian became FWB. When Kate met Dom, she told Ian she wanted to take things slow with him, to get to know him emotionally before getting physical. She said she was able to do this because she was still sleeping with Ian to satisfy her physical needs, which allowed her to focus on the emotional connection with Dom. Ian was fine with this arrangement and made it clear that he was just helping her find her special someone. They'd talk about Dom, and then they'd hook up. Once Kate felt confident Dom was the one, she ended things with Ian and fully committed to Dom. They later got married. Kate shared this setup with the other women, and over the years, they all ended up using Ian as their surrogate while dating their future husbands. And I'm apparently just the most recent guy in this whole twisted scenario. I asked Liv to explain how this played out in her case. I didn't care about the other women's stories, I needed to know about ours. Liv said after her last boyfriend turned out to be a narcissistic nightmare, she was done with dating the wrong guys and wanted to find a good guy. Someone like me, I guess. So she approached Ian, asking if he'd help her out like he did for the others. Ian, being his free-spirited self, agreed. He genuinely believes he's just helping people find love, and honestly, he's always been a kind, supportive guy. I've had deep talks with him, we've played golf together, he's been a fixture in my life ever since I started dating Liv. I just never realized how involved he really was. Liv explained that Ian was there to listen, give advice, help her sort through her feelings, and yes, sleep with her so she could hold out with me until she felt we'd really gotten to know each other. Hearing this made me feel sick. I felt like my entire relationship with Liv was a lie, but I still kept pushing for more answers, needing to understand it all. I asked her when she stopped sleeping with Ian. She said, "When we went official." I told her, "I thought we were official when we agreed to date, so what did that mean for you?" She replied, "Dating doesn't make us a couple. We became official the night I asked you to commit, and we slept together for the first time. Ian and I have been just friends since that night." I couldn't believe it. "So you were with him for 7 months? You slept with him the whole time we were dating?" She got quiet, and I knew the answer. I said, "So let me get this straight. I'd pick you up for a date, we'd go out, have a great time, hold hands, kiss, and then I'd drop you off so you could meet up with Ian, sleep together, and talk about how great I am?" She snapped, "Don't make it sound so dirty." I was stunned and furious. I wanted to just walk away, but we're literally in the middle of nowhere and my only option is to keep moving forward. Even though I should have just ended the conversation there, I kept digging. I asked her, "When you say you slept together, do you mean just basic stuff, or did you do everything we do, foreplay, positions, kinky stuff, all of it?" She went quiet again. I told her, "You need to answer me. I'm going to find out whether it's from you or one of them." I motioned toward the door, leading to the others' rooms. She finally whispered, "All of it, even more than with you." The room was spinning, but I couldn't stop myself from asking the last painful question. "When was the last time?" She answered, The night before our first time." I've never wanted to get away from someone more than I did at that moment. But instead, I just sat there, defeated. Liv tried to comfort me, but I pushed her away, telling her I needed space. I ended up crashing on the floor at the foot of the bed with a pile of blankets and pillows, feeling more trapped than ever. I got a few hours of restless sleep, but woke up still feeling sick to my stomach. Now here I am, sharing this update because I don't know what else to do. I want to walk out of here, but at the end of this trail is a 12-passenger van that I don't have the keys for. I'm stuck with these people for another 2.5 days of hiking, plus a long drive home, and I have no idea how I'm going to make it through. I'm feeling completely lost. Part of me understands the twisted logic behind what Liv and her friends did, but mostly I'm just devastated. It feels like our entire relationship has been one long con, like I was the second choice, the runner-up, the silver medal. I've got this overwhelming urge to expose everything in front of everyone because it's not just me. All these other guys are in the same boat. We're all here under false pretenses and it's eating away at me. I don't know what to do next. I've got about an hour before everyone else wakes up and I'm dreading facing Ian and Liv. Am I overreacting? Is this marriage even worth trying to save? I just don't see how we can come back from this. Now I'm back home, finally in the comfort of my own space. But it's looking like some of us, maybe even me, are staring down the road to divorce. Day 6 was a struggle, but I managed to keep it together. I'm sure everyone noticed something was off with me. I was unusually quiet, keeping to myself and trying to push the pace to get back to the van as fast as possible. Around lunchtime, I'm pretty sure Liv pulled Ian aside and clued him in on what I knew. After that, Ian started trying to buddy up to me, attempting to talk, but I kept telling him to back off. He kept pushing until I finally lost my cool and snapped at him to drop it, making it very clear I wasn't in the mood. Liv stepped in after that, and they both seemed to understand I needed more time to process everything. The next 24 hours went by relatively smoothly. Everyone just sort of left me alone, giving me the space I needed. But after our little blow-up, Ian's demeanor shifted completely. He wasn't his usual laid-back self anymore. Instead, he was acting standoffish, occasionally throwing out passive-aggressive comments aimed in my direction. Nothing too obvious, but definitely enough for me to notice. By the time we set up camp on the 7th night, I had managed to relax a bit and was starting to be more social. We were gathered around the campfire, cooking up the last of our food, sharing stories, and just hanging out. Billy was telling this long, embarrassing story about something stupid he did back in high school, something about his first girlfriend and a hilarious screw-up. When he finished, he laughed it off, saying, "I can't believe I was ever that dumb. I still cringe thinking about it." Then Ian, out of nowhere, chimed in with, "Well, at least you grew up. Some people never man up and get over the past." And he shot me the most condescending look I've ever seen. In that moment, something snapped in me. It was like an out-of-body experience. I saw red, and all my restraint vanished. "You know what, Ian? You're right. Sometimes you do have to man up and face the past," I said, ignoring Liv as she tried to interject. "How about we address the fact that you used to sleep with all of our wives while we were dating them?" The campfire went dead quiet. Even the bugs seemed to hush up. "Oh, you guys didn't know?" "Yeah, while our future wives were taking things slow to build a connection with us, they were hooking up with Ian here, using him as their personal toy." Dom and Billy looked stunned and angry, while Sean had this look like he'd just caught his grandma doing something unspeakable. I wasn't done yet. I turned to Dom and said, "Kate was the brains behind this genius plan. She figured the key to a lasting relationship was taking it slow emotionally while keeping her physical needs met on the side. All you need is a best friend willing to scratch that itch after you get all worked up from a date." Dom was furious. "What the hell, Eli? How do you even know all this?" I just smirked. I found out 2 days ago that when I'd take Liv out for drinks, those weren't the only shots she'd be taking that night. Liv lost it then, screaming at me, "Why are you doing this? You don't need to," but she was cut off when Sean suddenly spoke up. "It's true, it's all true." Everyone turned to him, stunned. "I've known since Sarah and I were dating. I didn't realize it was all of you guys until after we got married. I'm sorry, Eli, I should have warned you." "Billy, I didn't know it was you back then either." Billy's face dropped. "Sean, we used to double date with Miranda and Sarah. Sometimes we'd drop them off at Ian's place after. Does that mean—" Sean just nodded, and the realization hit Billy like a ton of bricks. I turned back to Ian, unable to resist a jab. "Two at once, huh? You really are a dog." I let out a howl like a wolf, a stupid move in hindsight, but at the time I thought it was hilarious. The camp was a mess of arguments, everyone yelling at their partners, when suddenly there was this audible gasp and whimper that drew everyone's attention. Odie was sitting there, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Ian and said, "Lies, more lies. It never stops. No matter how much I forgive you, no matter how many times I take you back, you always do this." He slapped Ian across the face, then stormed off down the trail. Ian chased after him, but it was chaos after that. The other 3 couples split up, arguing amongst themselves, each heading in a different direction. I stood there by the fire, feeling a strange sense of triumph. Liv walked up to me, her face full of anger and disappointment. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly. I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "I've never been more f***ing happy with myself. I'm 80/20 on divorcing you right now, so I suggest you leave me alone until we're home, unpacked, showered, and fed, because all you're gonna do is push me to 100. She didn't say another word, just turned and went into our tent. The next day was one of the most painfully awkward days I've ever experienced. Packing up camp in the morning, hiking back to the van, loading everything up, and then the 4.5-hour drive home, all of it in almost complete silence. I think maybe 19 words were spoken between all of us the entire time. Now, I'm sitting in my bathroom, freshly showered, feeling completely drained. I'm about to go eat some chicken nuggets, drink 3 Dr. Peppers, and then have a talk with my wife. I don't know what's going to happen next, not just for us, but for everyone else involved too. All I know is that whatever happens, it's not going to be pretty. It's been 4 weeks since we got back from the trip, and honestly, everything feels like it's imploding everywhere. Dom and Kate are getting a divorce. They've been together the longest out of all of us, with a 10-year-old son in the mix, and Dom's taking it really hard. He had the longest courting period, 9 months, before they became intimate. Now that he knows the truth, it's eating him alive because he remembers how they didn't get physical until he started questioning if he wanted to keep pursuing the relationship. Knowing what he knows now, no matter what Kate says, he's convinced that the reason she held off for so long was because she didn't want to stop being with Ian. I caught up with Sean one night over a few beers. We've always been pretty good friends, even if we only met through our wives. Sean explained that Sarah had been upfront with him when they started dating. She told him she wanted to wait at least 3 months before having sex, but also let him know she'd still be meeting up with her FWB, Ian. Sean really liked Sarah, but was honest that he was only casually dating until he felt certain about someone, and Sarah was fine with that. So, unlike the rest of us who were left in the dark, Sean knew what was going on and even had his own thing going during that time. About 2 weeks before the 3 months were up, after a few double dates with Billy and Miranda, Sean realized he was falling hard for Sarah. He told her he wanted to be exclusive, and Sarah immediately scrapped her 3-month rule. They slept together that very night and have been solid ever since. They were completely honest with each other about their pasts right away, and that openness seems to have helped them weather the storm. They did have a small argument about the whole campfire fiasco because Sarah felt they should have just stayed out of it altogether. But they've mostly moved past it and are doing well as a couple. Thanks to Sean, I've also got an update on Billy and Miranda. They're trying to reconcile, but it's not easy. Billy feels like she cheated and is using technicalities to justify it, saying they dated for 6 months before becoming official. They've got 3 kids under 7 and they're both trying to make it work for the kids' sake, but Billy's struggling. He distinctly remembers dropping off Miranda and Sarah at Ian's on 2 different occasions, and knowing that Miranda went out with him while having a threesome plan has shattered him. Miranda insists that only one of those times did anything happen, and it wasn't a true threesome, more like a reverse train, whatever that means. Sarah confirmed the details, saying it wasn't a real 3-way, but honestly, does that make it any better? Ian tried reaching out to me to apologize, but I told him to go f*** himself and then blocked him. Odie reached out too, and we ended up talking a lot over the next week, which was unexpected since we were only really friendly acquaintances before. Odie told me that my outburst at the campfire was the last straw for him. He and Ian have been on again, off again for 15 years. While Ian puts on this chill, selfless image, Odie says he's actually very self-centered and manipulative. Ian would often break up with him or declare they were on a break so he could sleep around guilt-free, insisting he wasn't cheating. He'd always crawl back once he'd had his fun. Looking back, Odie realizes that at least 2 of these breaks coincided with these dating setups that Ian had going with our wives. Odie feels the worst about tolerating Ian's behavior for so long, constantly giving him another chance. But he says he's done for good this time. He's moving back to Santa Barbara and leaving Ian in the cold Midwest behind. As for me and Liv, we had the longest conversation we've ever had the night we got home, even though we were both exhausted. I told her right from the start that I didn't want to argue, debate, or anything like that. I wanted her to tell me everything she felt she needed to say without interruptions, and then I'd do the same. She agreed. Liv's side was a lot of apologies mixed with justifications. She would admit she was wrong, but then immediately follow up with why it was okay or how it led to some positive outcome. She did say she was really hurt by how I blew up at the campsite, but she acknowledged that Ian deserved just as much blame for pushing my buttons. When she finished, she asked if I had any questions, and I told her no. Now, I'm just left here trying to figure out where we go from here. I don't know if this is something we can get past or if it's the beginning of the end. I'm not sure if there's even a path forward, but I do know one thing. Things will never be the same. I started my side of the conversation by laying it all out. I told Liv that our entire relationship felt like it was built on lies, on false pretenses. I acknowledged that, logically, I could understand why she did what she did. the Ian FWB arrangement. After all, her 3 best friends did the same thing and ended up with great husbands, so I could see how she might have thought it was just part of finding the one. But deep down, all 4 of them had to know it was wrong to start a relationship this way. I told her it was incredibly hurtful to know she was sleeping with someone else during the early stages of our relationship. I felt like it held back the natural progression of us, and now it's fundamentally changed how I see the beginning of our time together. I looked at her and said, "Do you remember about 4, maybe 4.5 months into our relationship, we had that amazing day? We spent the whole day together and it ended with us back on my couch. We were kissing, your shirt was off, I was touching you over your shorts. It was getting pretty intense. And then you stopped. You apologized and said you really wanted to, but you weren't quite ready yet. You told me you wanted to be 100% sure. I told you it was okay, reassured you, and you looked at me with so much love before giving me a passionate kiss and leaving. And now I can only guess that you left my place and went straight to Ian's." Liv sat there, tears streaming down her face. I asked her, "Am I right?" She just nodded, and it felt like my worst fears were confirmed. I continued, "I put my energy into you, gave you everything I had, and you chose not to return that to me. You gave it to someone else instead. Maybe I could have moved past it if this thing with him had ended early on, in the first month or 2 when we were still casual. But by that point, we were spending so much time together, and you kept it up with him right until the day before we finally got together. You liked having both of us, and you found ways to justify it to yourself." I told her, "But the worst part of all this, the part you might not even realize, is finding out that you were more adventurous, more exciting with him. It's like a knife in the heart. It makes me feel like second best, like I was your backup plan, your safe bet, that I was just good enough." She cut in, trying to tell me that it wasn't like that she loved me and that what she had with Ian was just meaningless sex. She said it wasn't real, that when you don't care about someone, it's easier to be wild and uninhibited. I let her finish and then calmly reminded her, "Remember, we agreed it was my turn to talk." I went on, "I get that's how you see it, but it's not how I see it. As your husband, I've always felt it was my responsibility to give you my best emotional energy, physical energy, mental energy, sexual energy. I've given you all of that over the past 8 years. But now, knowing what I know, I realize I haven't always received your best in return. And as a man, I have to be honest, your sexual energy is incredibly important to me. To know that you didn't trust me with all of it, that I wasn't worthy of it, is something I can't overlook. I don't think I can come back from this, and I intend to file for divorce." Things got messy from there. She broke down, crying heavily, pleading with me not to do this. She offered herself to me, begging to start over, to try and rebuild what we had. I couldn't handle it, so I walked away. Later, she suggested that we were just both too emotional right now and that I needed to take some time to think things over. That did give me pause, and we agreed to take 3 weeks to cool down and reassess. It's been 4 weeks now, and my feelings haven't changed. We met with a mutual divorce lawyer who's helping us both through the process. Thankfully, there are no kids involved, and we've decided to sell the house, so the initial meeting went smoothly. But it's been incredibly hard on both of us. Liv is deeply depressed, and so am I. As much as it hurts, I know this is the right decision. Sometimes, no matter how much you want something to work, it just doesn't. Now on to the next story. My wife has been treating her yearly girls' trip like a free pass to cheat. My wife Laura, 31F, and I, Mike, 33M, have been together for 11 years and married for 8. We have 4-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. The past 3 years have been incredible. We make time for weekly date nights, our sex life is consistent, and we have these deep conversations that make us feel truly connected. Financially, things are going great too. Both of our careers are on the rise. It wasn't always this smooth, but it was never terrible either. We've grown up together, dealt with typical couple issues in our 20s, and every hurdle just seemed to make us stronger. That's why what I found out 2 days ago hit me so hard. Laura has been cheating on me. Every June, Laura and her best friend Jess go on a girls' trip. It's something they've done since they were 18. They usually pick a nearby tourist spot, spend the weekend shopping, lounging by a pool, or indulging in spa treatments. Nothing wild or suspicious. This year's trip was already planned and coming up in a couple of weeks. The other day, I was on our bank account app and it asked for a security verification. I clicked through, but it needed to send a code via text, and Laura's phone is linked to the account. Not wanting to wake her since she was napping, I grabbed her phone. Normally I'd ask, but she was asleep. I knew her passcode. She uses the same one for everything, so I unlocked her phone. Right away, I saw Snapchat open on her screen, and there was a message from Jess that said, "Are you really going to go through with it?" I had this gut feeling that something was off. I thought for a moment, then typed a response pretending to be Laura. Why wouldn't I? Jess quickly replied, "I'm just saying 2 guys at once is pretty intense." My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew I couldn't keep up the act, so I stopped replying and started scrolling through the rest of her snaps. There were 2 guys in the photos, and I vaguely recognized them from Laura's past. But since it's Snapchat, there wasn't much to see. Everything was gone. I kept digging through her phone, finding nothing in her texts or emails. Then, I spotted a weirdly named folder with WhatsApp in it. That's where I found the messages. Laura was chatting with her high school ex, Brian, 31M, making plans for their upcoming girls' trip. It wasn't explicit, no steamy texts or pictures, but the messages were flirty and they were definitely planning to meet at the hotel. Even worse, Brian was bringing his college roommate Dave, 32M, who was also Laura's second boyfriend. I was in shock. I couldn't believe she'd do this, and I started wondering how long it had been going on. There weren't a ton of messages, but it was clear this wasn't the first time Brian had joined her on these girls' trips. I knew Jess would soon figure out that last message didn't come from Laura, so I had no choice but to confront her when she woke up. She finally woke up about 45 agonizing minutes later, grabbed her phone, and didn't even notice me sitting in the corner of the room. She checked her snaps, sent a few back to Jess, and then it clicked. She realized I had been on her phone. She looked over, spotting me for the first time, and snapped. "Did you go through my phone?" I didn't even get the chance to speak before she started accusing me of invading her privacy. I couldn't believe she was trying to turn this on me. I fired back, telling her I knew about the cheating, about Brian and Dave, and that her trip with Jess was a cover. She tried to deny it all, saying I was reading too much into things, trying to gaslight me by insisting she was just catching up with old friends, and didn't tell me because she knew I'd react this way. It was all crap. I was so furious that it all erupted into a shouting match. I told her I wanted a divorce, and she threw back. "Really? You're going to throw away over 10 years because of a few messages?" She made it sound like I was the one walking away, and that pushed me over the edge. I snapped and said the one thing I knew would hit her the hardest. "I'm not the one throwing it away, you selfish bitch." I knew that would get to her. She hates that word with a passion, even when it's just on TV. She's never been that mad, but it worked. She blew up, screaming, "I do this for us!" I was stunned, but she kept going, ranting like she'd been holding it all in. "Why do you think our relationship keeps getting better every damn year? I deserve this. It's my one weekend to let loose, to deal with all the crap from the year. It resets me. If you can't understand that, that's on you. So what if I cross a few lines? Aren't you happy with our life? We've got it good, and all it costs is me getting a weekend off once a year." She paused, her tone softening but still firm. "I get it, your pride's hurt, but this isn't about you, it's about me. You've got a great life, and I just need this once a year. You need to make peace with it. Don't ruin a good thing because you're angry." I was floored. I felt dizzy, my chest tight, like I was suffocating. I couldn't even respond. I just got up, walked out, and drove straight to my brother Dan's place. When I got there, I texted her, "I'm at Dan's. Please don't contact me. I need time." It's been 2 days since then, and I've been lying low at my brother's, just saying we're dealing with some normal marital issues. Every morning, she messages me asking me to come home and talk, and I just reply, "Not yet." I'm completely lost. I've never felt so hurt or been treated so heartlessly. I love her, but this is too much. I plan to go home tomorrow to try and sort this out, but honestly, I don't see how we can ever get past this. 8 years later. I can't believe it's been 8 years since everything went down. I had all but forgotten about my old posts until I stumbled across a Facebook reel with a robot voice reading my story. It got me feeling nostalgic, so I thought I'd drop an update for any of you long-timers who might remember. Leslie, Donald's wife, went absolutely nuclear when she found out. She was a stay-at-home mom, and when she got my email, it confirmed all her suspicions. At first, she directed her anger at Laura, but soon realized Don was the real problem. Leslie dug deeper and uncovered even more affairs, along with thousands of dollars spent on OnlyFans over the years. She ended up with the right judge, and Don was ordered to pay both alimony and child support, and if that wasn't enough, Leslie aired all the dirty laundry on social media the moment their divorce was finalized. It was quite the spectacle. As for John, I don't know much. Laura told me he went off the grid after I messaged his wife. About 2 years ago, he popped up in my friend suggestions on Facebook. When I clicked on his profile, it looked like he was single and living about 1,500 miles away. Scarlett's divorce was swift. She blamed Laura for her marriage ending and cut her off completely. Because of our shared social circles, I've still heard bits and pieces of her situation. Scarlett had a prenup with an infidelity clause, so she ended up with only a quarter of what she would have normally received in a divorce. Her ex also figured out who her affair partner was and exposed him, which led to his own divorce. Scarlett and the guy eventually went public with their relationship, and she got pregnant about a year in. But surprise, surprise, it's been a disaster. He's still cheating, just now on her instead of with her. She's gained a lot of weight, and mutual friends say she's just a shell of her former self. She won't leave him because she's too determined to make it work. Otherwise, everything she sacrificed would have been for nothing. Now, about Laura. She initially tried to fight the divorce, but that didn't last long. She signed off, and the whole process took about 6 months. During that time, she kept trying to convince me to reconcile, but her level of delusion was enough for me to never even consider it. The twins always said she was great when they were with her, but I knew she was on a self-destructive path when she was on her own. She fell into a cycle of drinking and partying, which often ended with her reaching out to work things out. This escalated when Kate, my now wife, and I went official. One night, Laura drank too much, drove, wrecked her car, and ended up with broken bones and a lengthy stint in physical therapy. The wreck also brought some legal trouble, but it served as a wake-up call, pushing her to finally start therapy. Therapy has been a game changer for her. She's confronted her narcissistic behaviors and unrealistic beliefs. It took a few years, but she eventually gave me a genuine apology for her infidelity, admitting that she wasn't doing it for us. She's been a fantastic co-parent since, and we're pretty friendly now. The twins' birthdays and other events are often celebrated together without any drama. About 3 years ago, Laura met someone and they're in a poly relationship, which didn't exactly shock me. They got married last year, but she still has her boyfriend of 2 years. Occasionally, all of them show up at the same events, and I've just learned to roll with it. Her dad, Gary, didn't take it so well. He cut Laura and the twins out of his life, which led to my former mother-in-law divorcing him. Now he's just a lonely, bitter old drunk. As for me, life's been good. When the divorce was finalized, I had every intention of living it up and dating around. I downloaded the apps and matched with a few women, but then I went on a date with Kate, now 37F, who was also freshly divorced and looking to enjoy some freedom. Our first date went great and she stayed over. We ended up spending the next day together and kept messaging all week. She canceled a date with someone else so we could spend the next weekend together. I stopped chatting with the other women I had matched with, and we both deleted the apps. Before we knew it, we were in a committed relationship. Now, we've been together for nearly 8 years, married for 6, and we have a 3-year-old daughter. So, even though our plans to play the field didn't pan out, things worked out just fine. I don't know if I'll ever update again, but thanks to everyone who followed my story, offered advice, and sent well wishes. Who would have thought that simply checking a bank account could lead to 6 divorces, a poly marriage, and me becoming a 42-year-old dad to a toddler? Life's funny like that. Now on to the next story. Go ahead, try to sue me if you think you've got what it takes. I'm a military veteran who got injured in Iraq, and I mention that because it's relevant to the story. I worked for this guy who owned a few businesses in a small town. He was the wealthiest man around, but it wasn't some big company, just a few local ventures he ran. It's important to explain how I ended up in this situation, so bear with me while I get to the meat and potatoes of it. I joined the military before finishing high school due to a late birthday. I chose a path that I thought I'd enjoy. I became a mechanic because I've always loved working on things. Plus, The sign-on bonus was pretty sweet. During basic training, I only spent on what I needed, so I saved up a lot. By the time I finished advanced training for my military specialty, I had half my bonus and almost a year's pay sitting in the bank. Most people my age would have blown it all, but I was smarter about it. I invested in the stock market, dabbled in Bitcoin, and even paid off my parents' house. A few deployments later, I had the rest of my bonus, and the only big thing I ever bought was a hot rod. So I ended up with a good chunk of money saved and invested. By the time I was discharged, even after a rough divorce, I was still pretty comfortable. Don't get me wrong, I didn't have stupid money, but I was doing all right. The divorce took a toll on my stocks, and if you've followed Bitcoin in the last couple of decades, you know how volatile that can be. After the split, I focused on recovering what I lost and staying busy. I loved being a mechanic, so I just bounced around, taking jobs wherever I felt like, knowing a good mechanic could find work anywhere. After about 10 years, I decided it was time to settle down, and I picked a quiet little town called Marlow, Oklahoma. I was tired of working on other people's cars all the time and wanted to spend more time on my own. I bought a small house, and when I spotted a help wanted sign at the local lube shop, I thought, why not? It was simple work and would cover my bills. When I grabbed an application, the locals gave me all kinds of funny looks. For reference, I'm 6'3", and ever since leaving the military, I let my hair grow out, stopped shaving, and got a full sleeve tattoo. People usually cross the street instead of walking past me. I went to turn in my application to the bookkeeper, Jessica. She noticed that I was a veteran and marked a Y on my form. Later that day, she called and asked if I'd come back in to meet the owner. Let's call him Mike. She said he'd be in about an hour and we could chat about the job. When I got there, Mike's eyes practically popped out when he saw me, but we got to talking and I guess my southern charm won him over. He handed me a calendar featuring his car collection and asked me to name the ones I recognized. There were a few Mustangs, a Ford GT, a Bricklin SV1, a Judge, a Demon, a Pantera, and an MXT. He was impressed that I knew what the SV1 was, and we bonded over our shared love of cars. He offered me the job and explained the deal. $100 a day, working Monday to Saturday from 8 to 6, no overtime. I'd get a full day's pay even if we closed early, and I could eat whenever I had time. Sundays were always off, plus one extra day during the week. Things started great, and I worked there for about a year with no issues. Then Mike asked if I'd be willing to help out at his other lube shops in nearby towns, giving the regular guys some time off. He said he'd toss in an extra $20 a day for travel. I agreed and did that for about another year. But then disaster struck. Mike met Lisa, and within a month they were married. He started funding her gambling habit, and that's when the problems began. One week, I noticed my paycheck was only $250, so I asked Jessica about it. She told me there had been some changes, and I'd need to speak to Mike. No big deal. I called Mike, and he showed up with Lisa. When I asked why my pay was short, he said it was because bad weather forced early closures, hurting the business. I was willing to let it go because Mike had always been a good guy, but then Lisa chimed in, saying, "It's not fair to us to pay you for a full day when you don't work the full 10 hours. I pointed out that my pay was on a daily rate, not hourly, which was why I didn't get paid overtime for all the extra hours each week. She snapped back, claiming that wasn't how things worked anymore, and that I'd only be paid for the hours I actually worked. I just thought, whatever you say, Lisa. Fast forward to the next week, and we had a series of very busy days. We stayed open a couple of hours later than usual to handle all the waiting customers, and I even gave up one of my days off to cover for a coworker who was out sick. So, when my paycheck, which should have been over $800, came in at only $600, I had some questions. I called up Mike and asked why my pay was short. He shrugged and said, "Well, that's what we agreed on, $100 a day." I stared at him, a bit baffled, and asked if he'd forgotten about the extra hours last week. He just shrugged and said, "It is what it is." I was already feeling pretty aggravated when Lisa walked in and said, "What's he complaining about now?" I looked at her coldly and said, "Well, I worked 80 hours last week and you all only paid me $600. She shot back, "You're contracted labor and you agreed to $100 per day, so why would we pay you more than that?" I turned to Mike and asked if that was really how things were going to be. He just nodded and said, "You heard the lady." I went home telling myself that I was only working to cover my living expenses anyway, and that the job wasn't that hard. The only other options in this small town were assembling sheds or slinging chickens at the processing plant. The next week, one of the guys I worked with got chewed out by Lisa in front of customers over what she claimed was an OSHA violation. She said that as part owner, it was her job to make sure all OSHA rules were followed. His supposed violation? Wearing tinted safety glasses. That was ridiculous because the shop bays faced east-west, so workers got blasted by the sun during the day, and pit workers like me got it in the evening. As I walked by, shaking my head, Lisa noticed and yelled, "Got something to say, you big baby?" I just kept walking. I pulled Jessica aside and told her she needed to have a serious talk with Mike before Lisa's mouth wrote checks he'd have to cash. She just shrugged and said, "I just keep the books, don't involve me." This nonsense went on for another year, and I was finally at my breaking point. The day I started my malicious compliance, I was in a terrible mood. I woke up to the news that a good friend of mine, the one responsible for me surviving an explosion in Iraq, had been killed by a drunk driver. Not wanting to deal with anyone, I told the shop I'd be working in the pit all day and to leave me alone. The guys knew something was up. They'd been working with me for years and could tell I was not myself. I never expected to see Lisa that day since I was at the furthest shop, on the opposite side of town from her usual casino trips. But luck wasn't on my side. Mike and Lisa showed up and she stormed into the pit, yelling, "Mike, come look at this mess." I had no clue what she was talking about. I kept my pig spotless and always cleaned as I worked, unlike some who waited until the end of the day. She was mad about 50 of our most common oil filters stacked on the waste drums for easy access, a setup Mike had known about for ages and never had a problem with. Mike walked in, looked around, and in a patronizing tone said, "Clean up this pigsty." I glared at him and said, "Today's not the day, Mike. Move on and take her with you." That sent Lisa into a rage. She thought it was the height of disrespect toward her and Mike. He told me that if I didn't like it, I was free to leave, so I did. But don't worry, this story isn't over yet. This was just the first flap of the butterfly's wings that set off a massive storm. The next day, Mike called me and asked me to swing by the main shop on my way home. I thought he was going to apologize for what happened, maybe after hearing from the other guys about why I was so on edge. But no, that wasn't the case at all. Mike called me in to inform me that I was being put on probation for the next 6 months due to my behavior and would only be paid $50 a day. I'd also lose the $20 travel allowance for going to the other shops. I asked if he was serious and if he'd really thought this through. That's when Mike's true colors showed. He told me I was lucky I wasn't fired for my constant disrespect toward him and co-owner Lisa. He said that if he didn't pity me for being a struggling disabled veteran, which by the way I never once discussed with anyone at work, he would have fired me long ago. I guess he assumed I was broke and desperate just by looking at me. Something inside me snapped, and I started laughing. Mike asked what I found so funny, and I stood tall, stepping up to him like a drill sergeant ready to lay down the law. I told him, "You should reconsider your life choices and who you go into business with." Mike sneered and said, "What, you gonna sue me or something? Go ahead if you think you can afford it. What do you get from the VA, like $1,000 a month? I know how bad you need this job." That wasn't my plan, but it triggered my malicious compliance instincts, and once a soldier, always a soldier, so I went to war. That day, I called a labor lawyer, paid the $3,000 retainer, and kicked off a lawsuit for an unsafe work environment, unpaid overtime, and minimum wage violations. I kept working for Mike, and it was glorious, but I still wanted more. It took about 6 months of my probation for the lawyer to get all the paperwork together and filed. I told him to slow roll it, and since he was a former Marine, I think he had an idea of what I was up to. When everything was ready, my lawyer filed the lawsuit, and Mike and Lisa were served at the main shop while I was working. They read through the papers, and my lawyer's process server stuck around to witness what I knew was coming. When Mike and Lisa realized I was suing them, they flipped out. Mike shouted, "I should kick your ass, you ungrateful piece of shit." And Lisa screamed, "You're fired, you coward. I bet you weren't even really in the military." The process server recorded the whole thing and handed it over to my lawyer, who added unlawful termination to the lawsuit, since firing someone for suing is illegal. The next day, I opened my own lube shop and car wash combo, and I started recruiting my former coworkers at higher pay plus commission. They were eager to join the lawsuit, and my lawyer was happy to add them to it. 2 years later, after subpoenas for security footage, financial records going back 5 years, and sworn testimonies, we finally went to mediation. Mike and Lisa offered a measly $50,000 to split between the 15 of us, which didn't even cover the unpaid overtime. We declined, and then our Apache helicopter swooped in to save the day. Sent by the IRS and delivered to my lawyer, the documents were related to our request for the company's tax records. Mike had cleverly set up each lube shop as its own LLC, with separate tax IDs and employment records. Thinking they were slick, Mike and Lisa filed for a tax credit for employing a veteran at each of their 6 shops. They claimed I was a full-time employee working at least 36 hours a week at $12 an hour to get tax breaks for hiring a veteran. At the next mediation, my lawyer laid this information in front of their lawyer and the mediator. After a quick 20-minute discussion, Mike and Lisa returned, agreeing to our demand of $400,000 in unpaid overtime to be split among the 15 of us, all legal fees, and a personal settlement for unlawful termination of $20,000 per shop, where I was listed as an employee. They also paid unpaid wages for the 6 months I was only earning $5 an hour. Their one condition was that we all agree to a gag order, keeping everything confidential. Of course, we signed and took our payouts, but somehow their tax paperwork landed in the hands of just the right person at the IRS, and they were soon under investigation for tax fraud. I sold my shop to the guys who had joined the lawsuit. They each paid me $8,000, and I washed my hands of the whole ordeal. I put my house up for sale and moved away. About 8 months later, I went back to deal with an overgrown lawn at my old house. The guy who was supposed to handle it had been arrested, and the city was threatening to fine me $100 a day until the yard was up to code. So I went down to mow it myself. While I was there, I stopped by my realtor's office to see about yard maintenance. Who do I see sitting at the front desk? Jessica, looking as content as could be. Jessica couldn't tell me fast enough about everything that had gone down. It was perfect. What I thought was just a small victory turned out to be an atom bomb. Mike had filed for bankruptcy, trying to avoid going completely broke after making a plea deal for probation on tax fraud charges and paying a fortune in back taxes. Lisa had taken off with some guy she met at a casino. I asked Jessica 2 questions. If she knew who reported the fraudulent tax documents to the IRS and what happened to Mike's car collection. She said, "I have no idea," but suggested I check the parking lot behind the realtor's office on my way out. Sure enough, when I peeked behind the office, there sat a bright green Bricklin SV F1. Mike had started selling his cars early and cheap, hoping to buy them back after filing for bankruptcy. To this day, I don't know who, if anyone, actually reported the paperwork to the IRS. My best guess is that whoever was tasked with compiling it noticed something off and flagged it. However it happened, it couldn't have hit 2 more deserving people. Now on to the next story. My ex-wife got married to my best friend, and it's tearing me apart. It's completely wrecked my marriage. I've been with my wife Emma for 5 years now, and we've been married for 4. I'm 37 and she's 26. She has 3 kids from her previous relationships, 2 boys and a girl, all between 5 and 8 years old. I love her and the kids like they're my own. Things were great until a few months ago. I've worked hard and got 3 big promotions in 5 years, and we bought a house last year. Emma stays home with the kids, trying to make a career out of social media. I've always been unsure about having kids, but Emma really wanted one of our own, so I agreed to reverse my vasectomy. She's 7 months pregnant now, and we were over the moon. My ex-wife Megan divorced me back in 2019 and moved about 2 hours away during the pandemic. Our split was friendly, but after the divorce was finalized, I never heard from her again, even though I'd still reach out on her birthdays and holidays. I even sent her a graduation gift when she finished her PhD. Other friends, including my parents and sister-in-law, who also sent gifts, received thank you cards from her. I didn't even get a text. Megan was always kind and thoughtful, and the person I knew would have at least sent a simple thank you message, even to someone she wasn't on good terms with. Despite our breakup, I didn't think she hated me. Then there's my best friend Jake. We've been tight since college, and he's the kind of guy everyone considers their best friend, but he always said I was his real one. We lost touch a bit during the pandemic. He lives 2 hours away and he's busy with his job as a lawyer and a university lecturer. My life was crazy too, with my demanding job, a new wife, and 3 kids. I didn't even notice when our texts started to dwindle, and the last time he responded was late in 2021. Jake has a habit of going quiet whenever he's wrapped up in a new relationship, only reappearing when things calm down. We've always been those friends who could go months without talking and then pick up right where we left off. I kept telling myself I'd call him when life was less hectic. Last summer, Emma and I went to the city where Jake and Megan live for a week. I called Jake a few times, hoping we could meet up, but he never answered. I was bummed, but I just figured he was busy with work or maybe caught up with someone new. I met up with other friends instead. Then, in October, I went back to the city for a Halloween party, thinking Jake might show up. But he was there. I went over to greet him, but he looked surprised and gave me a weak hug. I told him I'd been around in the summer and had tried calling him to hang out. He just said, "Yeah, I was on my honeymoon that week. Sorry I didn't get back to you." I was stunned. My best friend got married and I hadn't even known he was seeing someone serious. I felt hurt but also happy for him because, well, he's a great guy and women always liked him. I started asking rapid-fire questions. Who is she? What's her name? Where did you meet her? How long have you been together? He paused, then said, "It's Megan." Megan isn't a super rare name, but it's not common either. When he said her name, I knew he meant my ex-wife. The moment he said it, I felt like my stomach dropped and I wanted to crawl into a hole. I've never felt that way before. I just managed to say, "What the hell?" He told me I had no right to be mad, that I broke her heart, and that they hadn't started dating until 2 years after our divorce. He also threw in a jab about how I'd chosen to be with some waitress instead. I spent the rest of that weekend drinking because it was the only way I could get any sleep. I felt completely betrayed. My best friend of 17 years married my ex-wife behind my back. Megan and I were married for 6 years, and Jake and Megan were never even close friends, but now they're in love? I later found out he'd been bad-mouthing Emma and me behind my back, saying he never liked my new wife. When I got back home, I was distant with Emma and the kids. I was just hurting so much, and it showed. A few weeks went by, and after a big argument, Emma called me out on being so withdrawn and accused me of cheating. I finally told her about Megan and Jake, and she just rolled her eyes and said she'd known about them for a long time from social media. I lost it. We argued for hours. I felt like she had betrayed me too, keeping that from me the whole time. She never said anything when I complained about Jake not returning my calls or messages. That night, I didn't get any sleep before work, and afterward, I just went to stay with my parents for a few days. When I finally went back home, we got into another argument. Emma accused me of still being in love with Megan and said that if I didn't care, I wouldn't be so upset. I snapped and called her stupid, telling her she wouldn't understand because she doesn't have real friends. I tried to explain that I wouldn't care if my ex-wife married anyone else, but it's different when it's your best friend. I don't see why that's so hard to understand. We eventually made up, but I still feel sick to my stomach every day, and our relationship isn't the same. I love Emma, but I've come to realize it's not in the same way I loved Megan, and it feels like Emma doesn't love me the way Megan did either. I've started to regret the things that led to my divorce because Megan and I were really happy until the day she left, and now, my best friend is too busy sleeping with my ex-wife to care about me anymore, so I don't even have him to lean on. Everything feels empty and fake now. A lot of my friends agree that Jake and Megan betrayed me, but they all say I need to move on. Even my dad and brother told me to let it go. My sister-in-law yelled at me about it, and my mom tries to comfort me, but I know she's tired of hearing my problems. I have to pretend I'm okay, but I'm not. No one really cares about men's mental health, and it feels like I'm alone in this. I brought up the idea of couples therapy to Emma, but she brushed it off, saying we were fine because we'd worked through things. So I guess I just have to keep pretending everything's fine because divorce isn't an option right now. I need advice on how to get closure. I've thought about driving to their city and just showing up to make them talk to me, to help me move on. Is that too much? I also don't know how to get Emma to see why it's hard to trust her after she kept such a big secret from me for so long. This is sort of an update to my last post, and I'm hoping for advice on how to deal with all this. I've tried to write this update a few times, but it's hard to make sense of everything, so I'm just going to dump it all out here. I guess I should start by admitting I have way more issues than I mentioned in my first post, or even realized back then. Therapy is helping me uncover a lot of that, and it's uncomfortable on the good days and crushing on the bad ones. So many people talk about feeling better after therapy, but honestly, I feel worse. Still, I'm sticking with it because, as hard as it is, it's helping me figure out better ways to handle things. It's also helping me understand myself a bit more. I know I've been a shitty person, but I wasn't always like this. I'm starting to see where things went wrong, and understanding that feels like the only way I can work on fixing myself. I did inpatient therapy, and now that I'm out, I see a therapist in her office once a week and virtually once a week. I also see a psychiatrist every 2 weeks and started on some medication. It's weird because I can feel the meds helping some parts of my brain, but they also dull other parts and make my body feel off. I try to explain it to the doctor, but he just says it'll take time for the meds to fully work and that I'll get used to them eventually. Emma had the baby while I was in therapy, but she told me there was a chance the baby wasn't mine. I grieved over that, but I tried not to dwell on it too much until we knew for sure. The results came back last week, and it turns out the baby isn't mine. Right now, we haven't made any decisions about our relationship. We're living together for the kids and to help her recover from childbirth. Emma said that if I didn't want to be with her anymore, she'd go back to her home state to live with her mom and stepdad. She also mentioned that she wouldn't be entitled to alimony or child support because of our state laws. But I told her I'd help her get back home and on her feet if that's what it comes down to. Since coming home, I've been more involved as a dad, and it's been good for me. Being active with the kids helps me forget about everything else, at least in the moment. But it would be a lie to say I'm not terrified of losing them if we split up, especially since they aren't biologically or legally mine. I worry a lot about their future and just want them to have a safe, stable, and happy childhood. I'm really heartbroken that the baby isn't mine. I wanted her to be mine more than anything, but for some reason I just can't bring myself to be angry with Emma. I cheated on Megan with her, so in some way it feels like karma catching up to me. And honestly, what could I really expect when our relationship started off like it did? There's also a part of me that gets why Emma did what she did. We're both damaged in our own ways, and we've lived through some similar tough stuff growing up. I don't want to go into all the details, but we both experienced things as kids that bonded us in ways we never really dealt with. I had a lot of privilege and more opportunities than Emma, so I thought I was okay because I didn't think about it much. But she never stopped thinking about it, and it's clear she wasn't okay. Megan, my ex-wife, is an incredible person, and she deserves happiness. I ended up sending her an email where I poured my heart out, apologizing for all the pain I caused her. I told her that I would do anything to take away the hurt I put her through, and I didn't expect her to respond. I also promised her that I wouldn't try to contact her again after this. Megan reached out to my brother a few times to check on me, and she's called me twice. We talked for hours, and I found out she's doing really well. She's genuinely happy, and I'm proud of her. I feel lucky to have had the years with her that I did, but I know it's time to accept that I messed things up and try to be better moving forward. I don't think I'll ever reach out to her again, but I'd be glad to hear from her if she ever decides to call. It still stings, but I've come to terms with the fact that that chapter of my life is closed. The door with Jake is closed too. We haven't spoken, and we probably never will. I've heard from other friends that he was always in love with Megan, and he's the one who convinced her to move to his city after our divorce. Knowing that actually helps because the version of events I had in my head was much worse. I also understand why nobody wanted to tell me about it. My brother and I have grown close again, though his wife isn't thrilled about it. I honestly don't know where I'd be without him right now. We had them over for dinner recently, and there was this moment where his wife and I were alone in a room. I apologized to her, and she hugged me, saying I was stupid, but that she knows I'm trying. I've got two really solid friends who've stuck by me through all of this, even though they've been clear from the start that they don't approve of my choices. They're all more support than I deserve. My relationship with my parents isn't great right now. They're upset because my brother confronted them about what happened to me as a kid, and now they feel like he's blaming them. They keep saying they did the best they could, and I think they're embarrassed too. I get it. I don't blame them because I don't think they knew what to do, but I'm not going to apologize either, so until I do, they're keeping their distance. This might not be the update anyone wanted to read, but it's all I've got. My life feels like it's still in pieces, but I'm trying to put it back together and mend some of the damage I've caused. I'd recommend therapy like everyone suggested to me, but I'll also say that it's tough because it forces you to be brutally honest, and that can reopen old wounds. But those wounds are like infections. You have to clean them out to heal, and that's gonna hurt. But I don't think there's any other way to get better. I'm just trying to figure out what the best decision is for the kids and for myself. Should I keep trying to work things out with Emma, or would it be better to make a clean break? I want to do what's right for the kids, but I'm struggling to know what that is.